So now that we have database mail set up, let's take a look at how we can configure the SQL Server agent and tie it to that database mail profile. So we're actually going to start not here in SMS, but we're going to come to our SQL Server and we want to open the configuration manager. And what we're looking for here is this service. So it's the SQL Server Agent, and make sure we've got the one for the particular instance that we're running. If you double click on it, things you want to verify here in your logon. Now I've got this set to log in using a local account. If you're doing this across the network, you're probably going to want to use a managed server account or a managed service account or a group managed service account if you're doing it across multiple servers. So you'll want to make sure that you have that set correctly. The other thing you really want to make sure of is make sure that the startup mode is set to automatic. Sometimes this will start out as manual, and that's a problem. We actually want it automatic because we want to make sure that it's starting every time this server comes up, the physical server comes up. So now that we've got that set, we're going to come back to the Object Explorer and we're going to go to our SQL Server Agent. I want to expand that, and here you'll see the jobs, the activity monitor. We're going to look at some of these things a little bit later on. But to configure the Server Agent, we're going to right-click and go to Properties. Now, the top three pages we want to pay attention to are the General, the Advanced, and the Alert System. So the General one, here defines what to do if the SQL Server stops unexpectedly. So we want to auto restart, and then we want to auto restart if the agent stops unexpectedly. So if either one of these drop, let's restart that agent. And then the location of our error log. Now the advanced has to do with SQL event forwarding. And there's two things here, the SQL event forwarding and the idle CPU condition. The SQL event forwarding, you'll use this if you want to forward events to another server. Let's say you've got 10 SQL servers and you want to forward events all to the same place. So you only have one place to go look for those events. So you turn that on by clicking forward events to a different server, and then you can specify which type of events. So unhandled events, all events, and then you can specify the level of events. So level 1 is basically going to be everything level 1 and above, which is pretty much everything. Normally what we're going to want, most people are going to want, is probably going to be about level 17 or higher. But as you look through this, you'll see some other ones you may want as well. So you may want, insufficient permissions for a request or something like that. But whatever one you select, it's going to be events if the severity is at that level or above. And then you could choose to do unhandled events that are at that severity level or above, or all events that are at that severity level or above. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn that off because I don't have another server to forward these to. The next one is going to be the idle CPU condition. And the idea behind this is you can set jobs to happen when the CPU is idle. But then we have to define what does idle mean in our context. And that is this option right here. So the defaults are average CPU falls below 10% and remains that way for 10 minutes. Now, that may not be valid, right? You may have some background processes run that are using, 10, 15%, and so your server may never drop below 20% CPU usage. Now, in order to know what that is, you're actually going to have to know how your server is behaving. So you'll use Resource Monitor, Performance Monitor, or Task Manager, or something like that to monitor CPU usage for a while and get an idea of what idle means in your environment. And then you would configure it. I'm going to go ahead and set this at 15%, and if it stays that way for 5 minutes or more. So now, if my CPU runs less than 15% for 5 minutes, then the SQL Server Agent is going to say, okay, we have an idle CPU condition. Now we can run any of these processes, these automated jobs that are scheduled to trigger when the CPU is idle. Now, our last one here is going to be the alert system, and this is how do we communicate when there is an issue. And so this is where we're going to tie it to that database mail profile. Now, we're using the mail system. The pager emails has actually been kind of a deprecated thing, so we're not going to worry about that too much. We're going to look at our mail provider. So our mail system is going to be database mail, and that's really the only one that we have. And the mail profile, and this is why we did the database mail configuration video first, because we have to choose right here the mail profile that we're going to use. And then it now will use that profile whenever in a job we tell it to send a notification. All right, we hit OK. It goes ahead and executes, saves our status, and at this point we have our database mail set up, and we have our SQL Server Agent set up. Now we're ready to start defining things for our SQL Server Agent to do, and that's something we're going to tackle in our next video.